Well, Internet, Happy New Year, man. We in the middle of that iceberg. That incomprehensible, unexplainable iceberg. Y'all seen part 1A, part 2. We jumping into part 2A, I'ma call this. Sheen. Let's get
Having
it.
watched part 1 of this, hopefully 3-part series, I highly recommend you go back and watch it, as each of these parts will build off of previous parts, as well as just so you can learn more about fun and interesting stuff if you haven't already.
Man, it's
These
been
right
a
here
great deep
are the topics
dive.
that were covered in part 1 of the iceberg as a refresher. And without delaying the video
Alright,
any
we done covered this. We done covered this. Alright. Y'all remember Ball Lightning? Y'all remember Telapa?
longer, here's part 2
It's not
of the
tilapia,
unexplainable
it's not
/
that fish,
incomprehensible
man.
iceberg. Beneath the surface.
Ooh.
Naga fireballs. Naga fireballs are dazzling red glowing orbs that rise from the water at the Mekong River in late October or early November
What the sheesh?
before they disappear. Locals have come to call the occurrence the Naga dancing fireballs, believing them to be supernatural and naming them after a giant sea creature that lives in the river called the Naga. These balls of light and fireballs wow the audiences and spectators who come in droves at the end of the
Like a
Wano
dragon,
Fansa
bruh.
to celebrate the unexplained lights. If I said that correctly, thank you. If I didn't, I apologize. So far there is, as you could probably guess, no definitive explanation as to why these fireballs exist.
I would say Brown's gas. Swap gas.
And no one is sure when they started. While scientists still debate on what could cause these balls of light to rise and put on such a show at this specific river. Many different speculations and explanations, not of the giant sea serpent variety, have been given that still don't seem to fit into the equation. A few different explanations of the event are possible. Buildups of swamp gas that spontaneously explode or ignite when it reaches air. With one, Dr. Manos
Like I said,
going so
swamp
far as to
gas.
say that the precise alignment of the Earth, Sun, Moon, and location of the Mekong River itself allows this exact occurrence to happen nowhere else on Earth but in Thailand. If that seems far-fetched, then maybe you're more inclined to believe that the river doesn't quite make this specific swamp gas, but instead it outputs phosphine, which causes the fireballs. The main detractor to that theory, though, is that phosphine is very unlikely to spontaneously ignite, and wouldn't stay lit while traveling at the speeds that these fireballs are reported to travel. There's of course the
Weird.
thought that it's not actually fireballs, but plasma orbs. Always has to be plasma involved, trust me, the further we go down this list somehow. That are formed when the river is hit with electricity, causing plasma balls to form, but no
Damn.
source of electricity has been found and there's no substantial evidence. And lastly, there are beliefs that the fireballs are actually tracer rounds and flares being fired from across the river to wow the audiences. This theory, though, was disproved in 2021 during lockdown when authorities came forward and stated that no gunfire or firing of flares were heard that night, hopefully putting that theory to rest.
Oh,
While the festival is
sheesh.
reported to have ran for hundreds of years according to locals, with only the name, and I'm going to butcher this, Phia Nok Lights, being about 35 years old. I hope that the event continues to awe for many more years and maybe, just maybe, somehow we'll see a Naga in the end.
That would be pretty
We
sweet.
don't actually know why humans need to sleep. We just know that we do and what happens when we don't. And no, it's not the Russian sleep experiment or anything like that. While that might sound far-fetched, if you just go right now and look up why do
Man, this guy with the Pokemon, man.
humans need sleep on Google, or your favorite search engine, you'll get very generic answers like, it helps support healthy brain function and maintain your physical health. And while that is indeed very nice to hear, that isn't a conclusive answer. Biologically, we don't know why humans need to sleep still. While if you don't sleep, you can die. You probably wouldn't die outright from lack of sleep before some of the symptoms or sleep deprivation would kill you first, in Minecraft. These symptoms usually begin with sleepiness, of course, irritability, trouble concentrating, headaches, and potentially paranoia and hallucinations. It takes
Sheesh.
rats 28 days to die of sleep deprivation. Don't ask me, I didn't do anything to those poor rats. And a man named Michael Cork died from lack of sleep after contracting fatal familial insomnia, an extremely rare prion disease that makes it impossible for a human to sleep.
Can you imagine dying because you can't sleep, man? Hey, yo, you should subscribe to the channel, man. You should comment below, and that way,
But
maybe
why
I
do
can
we
get
sleep at
YouTube
all?
Premium.
There are
Skip
animals
those
on this planet
ads.
that don't need sleep or sleep in very different ways, from bullfrogs that only need very minimal microsleeps, to animals that can turn off half their brain to sleep like the great frigate bird. But why do humans need sleep? There are about 4 major theories that scientists have come up with, and it may be an interconnection of multiple of them that leads us to finally understanding why we need to honk shoe. There's the energy conservation theory, that posits that sleep is to reduce the amount of energy needed during parts of the day, and nights when it's not needed for ideal hunting. There's the inactivity theory, which is the thought that if you don't go out at night where predators or injury could occur more commonly, you are more likely to survive, making it more beneficial for living creatures to sleep at night and pass that along to their ancestors. There is as well the restorative theory, which is essentially that the human body needs time for the body to repair and replace cells, and that their components that are needed for life run out during the day and must be replenished at night. And finally, there's the brain plasticity theory that states that sleep is necessary for the brain to reorganize, grow, and upkeep at night. While all of these theories are very prominent, they aren't all-encompassing, and they're there more to state that we really just don't know.
I think all of them have a little bit of validity to them, possibly. I don't know, I'm not a sleep scientist. Comment below if you are.
Why we need to sleep yet at a deep level. Just that we do. And that's kind of cool to me, and you'll see a lot more concept like that the deeper we go down this iceberg. And, speaking of, the placebo effect. The placebo effect is, according to the Australian government, no I don't live there, I just think they're cool, when a person's physical or mental health appears to improve after taking a placebo or dummy treatment. And before I even begin to get into this topic, I want to let you know that I want to do a deeper dive on this topic alone, as resources and stories I've read about the placebo effect are wild. So be sure to subscribe to see when that comes out. But in the meantime, let me give you a quick rundown. We aren't really sure whether the placebo effect is even real, to be honest, with many doctors and unknowingly patients swearing by it. There was a review of clinical trials in the early to mid-1900s that looked over how helpful or harmful placebos actually were. And the magic number that is still stated today is that 35% of people treated with placebos were treated with placebo alone. And while that alone is crazy, the effects of placebo with medicine seem to very much help, if not be a major factor in treatment. But those statements have come under much scrutiny over the years, as in the 1990s, I'm gonna butcher this name just as a heads up, Danish medical researchers Asbjørben, Hjarbjørnsen, and Peter Godtschek, I will not be repeating their full names and will be calling them Peter and Asborn from now on, did a widespread look at the account of placebo, and what they did or didn't do. And their results showed that over the course of 234 trials investigating 60 different clinical conditions, that the placebo effect doesn't really exist. This, though,
well, shit, groundbreaking.
Begins. Peter, not so much Asbjørn this time, was expelled from the board of the Cochrane Collective for being disruptive and undermining the work of the organization as a whole and what they stood for,
damn.
Especially in terms of meta-analysis in the collective's work. The results of many studies have been shown that the effect could be explained with patients possibly wanting to show that things have improved to the people in coats and that could influence it, as well as many other things like chemistry, I'm not going to get into this, but just so you know, placebo has been proven almost in certain areas to be as strong as morphine. That's all I want to say. I swear I'll be back to this topic, and I'll discuss how in some studies placebo has been shown to be as strong as morphine. I just said that. When saline was administered as a replacement and simultaneously stopped when a morphine-stopping drug was induced. It is so cool, but for now I need to stop or I will literally be here all night.
That is crazy.
Fairy circles. Not to be confused with the entirely different phenomena of fairy rings, which are rings of mushrooms that fairies live in, sadly not real. Fairy circles are areas in Africa and Australia where a circle of land is entirely barren of vegetation and is usually surrounded by a ring of heavier grass along its edges. These grassless areas and the area around them have been recorded for close to 100 years, and we are just now starting to get closer to find out how or why they even exist. They, until just recently, were only recorded to have been in the Namib Desert, in some of the least hospitable areas in Africa, and continue to defy all expectations.
That's some shit.
30 and 60 years until they get too big and then die off when they're invaded by grass. The oddest thing, though, at least to me, is not that they just exist, but that they're spaced out relatively well, and there's not just a few hundred.
They're crop circles, guys.
There's apparently number into the near millions.
It's aliens.
Part, if not possibly the scary part, is there might be more and more of these things going forward. Like I said before, they were seen and talked about since the 1920s in Africa, but they've also recently been found in Australia as well. This isn't shocking, as both areas seem to be desolate deserts that get little to no rainfall, but scientists only seem to find these odd circles in areas that get between 70 and 120 milliliters of water annually, and even if you go up to 120 milliliters of water, these circles don't appear. Now, researchers are much closer to finding out how these fairy circles live and operate than lots of other things on this list, but of the two theories, they can't get to 100% definitive proof, but boy is it close. I won't tell you which one is the theory that's more believed, and I'll leave that up to you to make your own informed decision. The first is that termite casts have been found in all of the fairy circles and they feed on the vegetation, which thins out the vegetation but allows the water to seep into the empty area of no vegetation, causing a buildup underground. And the ring of grass is the living grass enjoying the bountiful water. The other theory is that the grasses compete for natural resources of water and work together to weed out, other competitors for water in the middle of the fairy circle, allowing grasses along the edge to flourish and use the empty space as a small reservoir. But while we're getting closer to finding out the truth about these circles in the desert, I have had enough of random circles appearing without knowledge of how or why they exist. And don't even get me started on fairy rings. Fairy rings. Fairy rings are circles of mushrooms that grow... I'm just kidding. This is a fairy ring. This is a fairy ring in RuneScape. It's also not on the Iceberg. I just wanted to show off that people think that fairy rings are evil, and that you have to be saved from them, while also that they're magical, and fairies of course live in them. But speaking of circles of mysterious origin...
Yeah, if you eat all those mushrooms.
Man, I'm good at segues. The Potomsky Crater is a giant rock formation of shattered limestone located in Siberia that is roughly 520 feet across and 130 feet
Shattered
tall.
limestone, that shit came from space, you already know.
1949 has been puzzling researchers, geologists, and people on YouTube like me for many years. To this day, nobody has ever really been able to figure out what caused this to appear. While on the voyage to discover this crater, Vadim Kolpakov, the geologist who discovered it, was warned by locals to not go up and investigate up close, as anybody who had stepped into the crater would die. He did anyway, and was perfectly fine, hence why we know about it today.
Go Vadim.
In 2005, another person who went on the expedition did indeed die of a heart attack shortly after visiting the crater, so maybe the legend is true. Kolpakov came up with the first theory as to how the crater came to be, which was a meteorite. And while still a leading theory, many others have come and gone since. There's always the supernatural or otherworldly, which for this is that it was aliens. Yes, that cut and dry. While some other modern theories include an eruption of underground gas, volcanic explosions, and in 2006, a conference was held in which the attendees attempted to reason and figure out what really caused this crater. The attendees, while there, came up with the leading theory of the time, which is that it was believed to have been formed by geological process within the system with the help of gas and silicate. While this was of course the leading theory at the conference, many others are quick to point towards meteoric origins. And while we just may never know until the tools we have at our disposal improve to find out, all we know is that it's really cool looking, and that it appeared roughly 300 years ago.
Yeah, that's pretty badass, man.
And until we get a definitive answer, people will speculate and come up with many reasons as to its origins.
Alright, well that was 2A of the impossible, incomprehensible iceberg. I do hope you enjoy me for parts 2B, and if you haven't seen 1A and 1B, you can backtrack. I'll have them right here, or like right here and right here. Anyways, they should be popping up right about now. Pop, subscribe.